back to social studies. Let me go ahead and just get started. This is the only slide of the PowerPoint we're going to talk about. So I'm going to kind of go through these terms and talk about some of this stuff. And then we'll just jump right into some practice questions. And again, if we end early, then we'll just end. But citizenship is essentially inherent, meaning given rights and responsibilities to the country that you either live in or are born in or come from. And so you're not necessarily automatically a citizen just because you live in the United States. There's some criteria to being a citizen. You know, the first and the common is you're born in the United States, right? So if you were born in the United States, you're automatically granted U.S. citizenship. That means you have certain rights. You also have certain responsibilities and things that as a citizen you are required by law to do. Right? So it kind of goes both ways. There are things given to you and rights afforded to you, but there are also responsibilities on the other end in terms of things that you talk about some of those. Right? So again, born in the United States, kind of the most common. If your parents are U.S. citizens, you can be born in another country, but if you're born to U.S. citizens, you are also U.S. citizens in the eyes of the law. And then you can also become naturalized. Naturalization, or to become naturalized, is the term for a non-citizen to go through legal channels to become a citizen. Right? So just because you weren't born in the United States, or if you were not born to U.S. citizens, right, you come from somewhere else, it's still possible to become a U.S. citizen, but you have to go through this process named naturalization. It's a long process. There are, interviews, tests. It's a pretty comprehensive and time-consuming deal. So some of the inherent rights and responsibilities like we talked about. So being a U.S. citizen gives you, in terms of some rights or some things that, some positives. What are some good things about being a U.S. citizen? Right? Well, first of all, you are eligible to receive benefits from the U.S. government, right? For citizens, and that's going on right now with the crisis we're in, right? If you're a U.S. citizen, you are eligible for lots of benefits, things of that nature, right? On the flip side, right, some of the responsibilities that citizens have, one, and it could be considered a right also, but it is voting. So if you are of age to vote, it's your responsibility to an extent, right? But it's also a right, right? Because you have, it's a certain authority and you get a say in government, which is a privilege, essentially. So you get to vote for your representatives, vote for president, vote on laws, certain laws, right? So you get that responsibility, or you have that responsibility, but it's, again, that's kind of a privilege as well. It goes both ways. Some other responsibilities would be things like jury duty, or serving on a jury in a court. Right? Everyone will serve jury duty at some point, and that's simply going to report to a court somewhere, and I'll try being closer to the mic and we'll see. Caleb, are you getting the same issue as well? So let me sit up a little closer. Caleb says he can hear me. That doesn't mean it's necessarily not something on my end, but I'll just try my best. But Serenity, if you feel like it's too bad for the moment, for the time being, and you want to just watch later, that's okay. I understand. I'll try to sit a little closer and see if that helps. If not, just let me know. You could also just put me on mute and at least write this stuff down so you have it in your notes, and we can talk about it another time. Again, some other responsibilities, like I said, jury duty, so serving on a jury in a court case, right? Something you may or may not be called upon to do, but as a citizen, that's kind of your legal obligation. Paying taxes, right? Paying taxes isn't something that people particularly enjoy, right? Most people don't like giving away their money, right? But government has to run on some kind of funding, and taxes are a way that we, in an ideal situation, we see that tax money come back to us um, uh, in the form of benefits, in the form of education, schools, roads, maintenance, public spaces, public facilities. All of those things that we all have access to essentially come from tax money. Right? So again, those are just some of the rights and responsibilities. And I'm sure I'm drawing a blank and leaving out lots of other things, right? But essentially, citizenship is this set of inherent rights and responsibilities given to you. You were born in the United States, if your parents were born or are U.S. citizens, or if you become naturalized. So before we go on to some of the practice questions, let's look at these others. Immigration. Immigration is the act of people moving to the United States from other countries. Okay? So to immigrate means to move from somewhere else to or to anywhere. In the context of this discussion, when we're talking about U.S. citizens, we're talking about moving to it's not necessarily going on a long vacation, right? To immigrate means to actually come from somewhere else and move to that place permanently, move to the United States. Immigrants can become citizens, again, through naturalization. Underage children of naturalized parents are also granted citizenship. So if your parents move to the United States, become citizens, you as a minor would then automatically become citizens. Okay? But there are also lots of different people that live in the United States that are not citizens. Right? It's not like there are citizens and then there are illegal, right? There's a lot of people legally residing in the United States that are not U.S. citizens. And here's kind of the breakdown of some different categories or some types of non-citizens. Resident aliens. Resident aliens are foreigners that are citizens of another country that have permanent U.S. residence. So think of the word resident, right? To live or to reside somewhere. Right? So resident aliens live in the United States permanently, but are citizens of another country. And they have not yet gone through the process. Non-resident aliens. Non-resident aliens are the term given to foreigners who stay in the United States for a specified period of time. Maybe you're going to be in the United States for 2 years, or a year, or whatever it may be, right? Would be considered a non-resident. So like if you were to go to college, something along, okay? You're granted legal residency for a certain amount of time, but then after that, then legally you would be obliged or required, by law at least, to return back to you. Enemy aliens. Enemy aliens are foreigners who are a citizen of a nation at war with the United States. So, again, the term enemy conjures up, like maybe they're illegal or not allowed to be in the United States. It's just the term given to. So it happens often, right? If you are a citizen of a country, you might be living in the United States for a long time. And then your home country ends up going to war with the United States, and now you're just classified as an enemy alien, right? Under our laws, that doesn't necessarily mean you're subject to anything. You may or may not be, but you still have legal rights to be in the country. You might be watched a little bit if you're classified as an enemy alien because your country of residency is the United States. Okay? And then the last couple here, refugee. Refugees are foreigners fleeing his or her country to escape persecution or danger. Someone leaves their country for personal protection, or fleeing, maybe fleeing a civil war, fleeing being persecuted by the government or by groups within that country, right? So, like in Syria right now, there's lots of turmoil and war, and so you hear about Syrian refugees. Right? So the term refugee refers to, refers to foreigners who are leaving that country to escape. So they're legally granted some amount of access to the United States, to whatever country they're fleeing to. Right? It's not the same as being granted residency or anything like that. It's just they need a safe space to go, and so we temporarily allow that. And then so that way they don't have to return to whatever country they came from, where there may be war, there may be famine, there may be all kinds of things. Then the final one would be an illegal alien. That is just simply a foreigner who comes to the United States without U.S. legal documentation. Come on their own, sneak in, get across the border, and live without the. So that would be kind of the classifications of the non-citizens. So I see you're still with me, so let me pull up some practice questions, and hopefully if the audio is not any better, at least you can see some practice. So let me stop the share. Okay. So, let me pull this up. So let's see what we're looking at on time. Good on time. So, some of these things are things we specifically talked about. Some not necessarily the case. But we'll just kind of go through them and see how they. So, this isn't something we talked about today, but definitely something we've talked about over the course of the last couple of weeks. Blank outlines the rights of U.S. citizens. Blank outlines the rights of U.S. citizens. So again, for any of these questions, if you want to type your answer into the chat, either privately or publicly, either Caleb or myself, just as a way to access these practice questions, go ahead and do that now. And then while you are going over this, again, I'll reiterate, just in case people are watching this on YouTube at a later time, I just wanted to say, if you are in the classes in a live capacity, I've been trying to figure out ways to improve kind of the opening up at the end of the class for discussion and questions with audio and video turned on. So I feel like my last few attempts, I've just been kind of putting people on the spot, trying to do that. And so, again, I mentioned this earlier, but if you do want to ask a question over audio and video, or you want to have some kind of discussion, just mention it in the chat, either public to everyone or privately just to me. If you have questions, maybe just for me. That way I know there's people that want to have that discussion, and then I won't put everyone on the spot at the end of class. I'll just know either people want that or people won't. So I'm going to try that for a while and see. Again, we're just kind of figuring this all out on the fly. So hopefully we find some ways to interact more than just how we're doing it now. So I'm just kind of brainstorming new ideas and trying to come up with ways and things to make you feel comfortable, make you feel like you can ask questions. So back to number one. Our four choices for this question here are the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, a U.S. passport, or a person's naturalization. Blank outlines the rights of U.S. or U.S. And that would be second option, the U.S. Constitution. Right? The Constitution outlines all the rights given to U.S. citizens. Right? So beginning of class when I was drawing blanks on coming up with certain rights given to citizens, think about all the amendments to the Constitution. Right? Freedom of speech is a right. Freedom of the press, assembly, freedom, right to bear arms, so on and so forth. All those amendments are certain rights. Now, some of those are also responsibilities that you have, but think of those different amendments we talked about last week, and those are all essentially different rights that you have as a citizen that are listed in the U.S. So let's look at numbers 2 and 3. Okay, so again, just to kind of refresh our memory earlier, here are the different categories we talked about of non-citizens. So resident alien, non-resident, enemy alien, refugee, legal alien. So numbers 2 and 3 kind of go over hypothetical situations and ask you to identify what category does this person. So number 2 says Luvina married an American and moved to the United States from Trinidad in 2010. 3 years later, she filed a legal petition requesting U.S. citizenship. What category of alien does Luvina belong to? She married an American, moved to the United States. 3 years later, she filed a legal petition requesting citizenship. So, would she be considered a resident alien, a non-resident alien, an enemy alien, or a refugee? Okay? So think about it. Is she living in the United States, like permanently? I would say so. If she's married to an American and moved to the United States, that implies that she is living there with the intent of staying. Okay? So there's nothing in there about a country at war or fleeing a country. So enemy, alien, and refugee don't really make sense. And between resident and non-resident, remember, resident means you have permanent residency or you live there permanently. Non-residents are there for a defined period of time. So Luvina would be considered a resident alien. Going down to number 3, same category, like same group, right? Resident alien, non-resident, enemy, refugee, legal alien. Okay. Number 3 says, what would happen to the legal status of non-citizens living in the United States if their country declares war on the United States? So again, non-citizen. This person lives in the United States, but they reside in, or not reside in, but they have citizenship of a country that is now at war with the United States. A, they would become non-resident aliens. B, they would become resident aliens. C, they would become enemy aliens. Or D, they would become refugees. Okay? Remember, we talked about if they come from a country that is now at war with the United States, they would be considered enemy aliens. If you missed any of this, you can always kind of go back over it, but if you do have questions, just interrupt me and I can kind of stop. Let's look up, since we've got enough time, let's go ahead and go through the last 2 questions. So, number 4. Number 4 says, the United States must balance the right of society to protect itself against the rights of an accused. One aspect of this tension is the Fourth Amendment guarantee of the right of people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. Which of the following values is supported by this? So the values they list are free speech, privacy, civic duty, and volunteerism. Which of those values is supported by this amendment? And remember, the Fourth Amendment is essentially saying you have protection against unwarranted, unreasonable searches and seizures of your private. So, sounds to me like the answer should be pretty clear, right? Free speech, civic duty, volunteerism, those all don't fit, right? So hopefully this makes sense. Privacy, right? The Fourth Amendment values and supports privacy. It says, unless there is a reason, you can't just go and search through people's stuff or take people's stuff. There has to be reasonable evidence or reasonable cause. Okay? And then let's look at number 5. I'm going to have to zoom out pretty far, so hopefully you can see this okay. Yeah, that looks like it covers everything there. So hopefully you can read it all right. The bar graph says reported U.S. voter turnout by age in the 2012 presidential election. So on the left-hand side, or on the y-axis, up and down, it says age. So from the top down, the top bar is 65 and over. The next bar down, 45 to 64. The next bar down is 25 to 44. And the next bar down is 18 to 20. Those are ages, right? So, and then the percentages next to them correspond to the X values, or the horizontal part along the bottom, which says percent reported voting, right? So we have 70% of 65 and over, 63% of ages 45 to 64, 50% of people aged 25 to 44, and 38% of people aged 18 to 20, right? Reported that they voted, right? So, pretty straightforward. Let's look at the question. The question says, which of the following is a conclusion based on the graph rather than a detail of the conclusion? So this is essentially, we have a visual aid, but it's essentially a reading question, right? It's not testing your social studies knowledge or your skill in recounting facts or details. Can you figure out which of these is a conclusion as opposed to a detail, which is basically a reading question, right? A conclusion would be something not explicitly mentioned in the graph, but that we can, it's an assumption or a guess we can make. And I mean, guess isn't a very good word. Maybe an informed guess, or something that we can assume is true based on the information, right? So a conclusion isn't something that's directly stated, whereas a detail is just simply something that we can look on the graph and see clearly exists somewhere on the graph. Okay, so let's look, and maybe it'll make more sense as I go. Right? A, about 63% of people aged 45 to 64 reported voting in the 2012 presidential election. Okay? Is that something we can look at and see that is directly mentioned on the graph? Yeah, it is, right? Sorry, I had my chat hidden. Is that your answer there? Is that in response to number 5? Just making sure. So let's go through this, and then we'll talk about B next. So A is simply a detail from the graph, right? Because I can look at the graph right up here, and I can see that in the age group 45 to 64, 63% of those people voted. That's not a conclusion I can make based on the graph. That's just something that is stated clearly in the graph. So let's look at B. And you know my class as well if you are saying that, right? But you're correct, right? Because look, why is it not a conclusion? Because it's something that we can directly see on the graph. So B says those aged 65 and over reported the highest voter turnout in the 2012 presidential election at 70%. Okay, so the way it's worded is a little bit tricky because I can see why B would stand out as maybe the right answer. And if it hadn't said at 70%, then it would be a little bit more ambiguous and it would be or unclear, right? And it may be potentially the right answer. But the fact that they then say at 70%, okay, we can clearly look on the graph and we can see 65 and over, 70%. So it's not something that we have to make a guess on or project something that may be the case. It's just something we can look at and say it's definitively true. Right? Now let's look at C. C is a little bit different. C says if the 2012 presidential election is representative of elections generally in the United States, voter turnout increases with age. Okay? So first of all, that catches my eye because it's different than the other three. A, B, and D all kind of are similar. Right? And so the way C is worded makes it stand out to me as maybe being right, but at least being different. Right? So remember, conclusions tend to be not as specific and not something that is mentioned in the, if we're talking about the conclusions we can make off of reading something or looking at a graph, it's something that we can't look at and prove is true or say, look, they said that right there. It's a conclusion that we make after the fact, right? So C is correct here because it's saying if this information is representative of elections in general, in other words, if this is usually the case, then we might make the assumption that in our country, voter turnout increases as you get older, right? In other words, people in the older age groups vote more often, right? And so C is the right answer here. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. Let's go ahead and, stop there. And again, tomorrow and Thursday, we're going to go ahead and do some sort of review. And again, I haven't figured out exactly what that'll be, but there'll probably be some combination of practice questions tomorrow, and then maybe if I can figure out a way to do something a little bit more interactive on Thursday, then I might do that.